WoW's Forgotten expansion is making a comeback. WoW Classic. Let's take a look at this.
Seeing a lot of posts cropping up about the Burning Crusade and people wanting to go back to
Story of Binding?
back to
I don't have
World
one.
of Warcraft's first expansion, and to relive that moment in time once again. Because as we are now, there's a pretty good amount of time which has gone by since TBC Classic. For its re-release, it launched on June 1st, 2021, and Wrath of the Lich King came about on September 26th, 2022.
And already 3 years ago.
So we're looking at just about a 16-month duration overall. And soon
Really? Oh, God.
for us now, it will be near enough 2 years since anything Burning Crusade related was considered current content.
Yeah.
And with Classic as a
Carol
whole,
was
there's
good.
quite a cyclical nature of people enjoying the first 3 versions of the game. And maybe for enough people right about now, it does feel as though it's time to go back
I've
to
seen some people say
Outland
that.
once again. I have to say I've always been in favour of era versions of classic games that we end up leaving behind. Even if I wouldn't necessarily plan on playing them myself immediately, just having that option is nice, and there has been a noticeable rising demand over the past few months. And if
I think people replaying the nostalgia, I think in general TBC was good. I enjoyed it more than I enjoyed Wrath. I liked it less than vanilla. TBC overall was a fun time, but there was also a lot of not so fun times in TBC, a lot of downtime. But I have seen a lot of people get more and more like hyped up to play TBC again. Right.
If you paid attention throughout Classic so far, you'll realize a lot of things have happened because people just keep asking for them. But what made the Burning Crusade so great? What does it offer that other versions of World of Warcraft don't? And where did it perhaps miss the mark and may even want to see changes in the future? Today I want to go over what for me were the good and bad points of Burning Crusade Classic, and ultimately answer, why do people want it back? And why now? But
okay, this is one of the main reasons why Final Fantasy is good, by the way, because all the old content is still doable at relevant level without you just destroying everything in it. I can't speak too much about that because I haven't played that much Final Fantasy myself. Only a few hours, frankly, but I have heard people talk about that they've done a great job at making all the expansions that they've had all the way up to Dawn Trail now being good, right?
first, a quick word from today's sponsor, Ragnarok Origin ROO.
Holy!
Ragnarok Origin ROO is the sequel to the popular MMORPG Ragnarok Online, which continues its story with brand new gameplay and updates. There are a ton of new jobs in the game, such as the Rune Knight, which is the third job change of the Lord Knight. This powerful combatant uses runes and dragons to dominate the battlefield, or the Archbishop job from the High Priest, which offers unparalleled supportive ability to allies, as well as using holy magic to destroy their foes. On top of this, there have been a bunch of new activities added to the game, such as the new main quest line, which unlocks more and more new content as you progress over several days, or the Clash of Chaos, where primal demons attack and players must drive them back for the chance at huge rewards for lucky participants. There are of course new systems, such as the Nebula Path, that equips each job with unique armor that carries both strengths and weaknesses, encouraging strategic thinking, and the Nexus engine, which once again has strategy involved in increasing the power of your subclasses. This really is scratching the surface of everything which is available, but if you were an old player of Ragnarok Online and wanted to revisit it in 2024, this is the chance to do so, and you can check them out today via the link in the description down below and get started. Many thanks to Ragnarok Online ROO for the sponsor today. Let's get on back to WoW. Let's start with...
Can we skip this part? I like just watching it because we're kind of watching the video, you know, it supports his channel and stuff, so...
The good points for TBC. I'm someone who played it back in the day quite a good amount, but on a very casual basis, and then when it came out for Classic, I really did everything that I wanted to do in the game, which was mostly centered around the PvE content, so I've definitely got a few opinions about this expansion. First up is that it was a real spiritual successor to Classic in class design and having better balancing. Early on you could play Hunter, Warlock, Mage, and then when we started to get into tier 5, Rogue and Warrior also started to come online with gear.
They actually did it quite well of like making all those meme specs in vanilla like kind of viable. It was actually quite the balance and the design is good. I agree.
Before TBC Classic came
I played
out,
Enhancement Shaman a bit. It was
a very popular take that Rogue and Warrior wouldn't be good until tier 6 when they could get armor pen, but this ended up not being so true. On top of that, hybrids were made more wanted because they gave them buffs which people would want to bring to their raid.
Balance
they
was
buffed
okay.
Moonkin Aura from 3 to 5% spell crit, same for Leader of the Pack for melee crit. Shadow Priests were of course known as the mana battery this expansion and were invaluable for restoring mana, and really every single class did have a DPS spec that was wanted. Despite there being more choices though, it did still follow the kind of vanilla framework. There are these classes that do damage, and then there are these classes that make the classes that do damage do even more damage.
The one thing I freaking hated about TBC was the group stacking. You had to get a shaman in each group, you had to get a shadow priest for the caster groups, a boomkin for the caster groups, you had to get like a feral for the melee group, and it was so annoying that you had to like specifically tailor each group, and if you weren't in that group, you just didn't do enough damage or your healing was bad, and I hated that. I hated you had to class stack so much specific groups and warlocks and everything. It was so annoying. Definitely my least favorite thing about it. They should make a React category on Twitch and compare how much React there is versus game. Probably quite a lot these days, but I guess Twitch isn't really like a gaming platform anymore. I usually do my React in the beginning of the stream, and then we get into the gameplay.
It wasn't balanced across the board as future expansions had been.
It also makes for class identity though. Yeah, but I think for me personally, I probably would enjoy it more if the buffs that they would bring to the raid were more like raid-wide or something. I don't know.
They also introduced many pieces of content into the game which were planned for vanilla at varying different stages before they packaged them up and moved them into the expansion. You can even find very early versions of Hellfire Peninsula in vanilla if you know where to look. And Black Temple was supposed to be an endgame level dungeon or raid as well. Speaking of content, when TBC came out, there was an absolutely enormous amount of stuff to do. On original TBC launch, there was tier 4, so Grulza, Magtheridon's Karazhan, there was tier 5, Serpent Shrine Cabin and Tempest Keep, and there was...
Dude, those raids were good though, man. The amount of trash, a little bit too much, but these raids were all really good, in my opinion.
Even technically Mount Hyjal and Black Temple as well. The issue with people progressing back then were the attunements, where you had to complete tier 5s, then get into Mount Hyjal to kill the first boss to get into Black Temple, and up until the point when they nerfed the end bosses in tier 5, there were only a handful of guilds in the world capable of doing that.
Trash.
But on our re-releasing Classic, we had tier 4 by itself, then tier 5, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, attunements weren't that bad. It looks worse than it really is. I agree with that. But everybody always memes like, oh my god, you know, TBC.
And I think for how fast people go through content in Classic, that was the correct way to do things. There were still a lot of interesting gear options which very much fit thematically with how things were in vanilla. Your BIS just isn't equipping a certain armor type assigned to your class. Tanks wanted different stats as well and could optimize for more threat or more tankiness rather than just getting both at the same time. There was the new heroic dungeon system which added an extra level of challenge and reward, and there was plenty of gear available from reputations as well. There was the new competitive PvP mode in Arena and updates to certain battlegrounds as well, notably Alterac Valley to make it a bit more even between both factions. Speaking of Arena, people ran 5s in TBC. Okay, so it wasn't really for PvP that often, if I'm honest. People just wanted to cap out and have an easy way to get some upgrades for PvE. Nevertheless, throughout Classic so far, it has to have been the expansion where 5s was most active. Blizzard fixed the drums of battle meta before TBC began, so you only needed one leather worker per group, which wasn't unreasonable to get. Back in the day, the drums meta really started to grow during the Muru encounter in the Sunwell, because people just needed to squeeze every ounce of performance out of their character.
Dude, Sunwell was good though, man. I really liked raiding Sunwell. I think that was a super fun raid to do.
What involved doing is having 4 people pick up leatherworking and rotating these drums so they could always keep the buff up. Whereas in TBC Classic, when you used a drum, you got a debuff, so you just couldn't continually rotate them. This was a good change. Another good change was giving both paladins both seals, so one faction didn't have an advantage over the other. If Alliance never got Seal of Blood, there just wouldn't have been seal twisting, and Alliance most rep paladins would have been pretty bad to play, to be honest. There was so much cool profession gear. You could make Storm Herald, Lionheart Sword, the Spellfire set, Frozen Shadow Weave, and so on. It felt like the last expansion for a long time where your choice of profession spec really mattered. Achievements, I thought they were really fun the first time round on a character when you're just grinding everything out with your guild group. They definitely weren't as fun when you had to do them again and again, but at least...
Especially with how the meta is nowadays, with people having 15 different characters, it's not that fun. I like playing 1, maybe 2 characters though, so it's not too bad for me, right? I remember your raids in Sunwell Plateau, Misery. I did a lot of GDKPs back then, and they were really fast actually.
The first time I thought achievements were good. Maybe it would be worth speeding them up on alts in the future, or just dropping the requirements for them at an earlier stage. And Outland is a bit of a different vibe to just, well, many other expansions that we've ever had. It's a bit more on the sci-fi side of things. There's some really memorable zones. Zangarmarsh and Nagrand probably are my favorites. And there was also a lot of raiding content in...
Listen, visually I like Nagrand, but like leveling in Nagrand is kind of like a pain in the butt. Like, oh, kill 30 Talbuks, kill 30 big cows, kill 30 eagles. Okay, you're done? Okay, kill 30 more of each, and then you're done? Okay, kill 30 more again. It's like, I don't know, man. I love these big XP. The Talbuks, yeah, the Talbuks, exactly, man. What are those are the best, just vibe with music and kill shit. I don't know, man. I guess it's okay XP. I just never was like a huge fan of it.
Different environments too, with my favorites being Karazhan, Zul'Man, and Sunwell for sure. Yeah. There is definitely a lot to like about TBC, and those would have to be my main ones, which I can just pick off the top of my head. But what was it?
TBC is better than Wrath, I think, for sure.
A bit more on the negative side. What didn't it do so well? Where maybe could it be improved even in the future? Well, if I think back to one thing in TBC, it's that outside of raiding, if you didn't PvP, there just really wasn't anything to do. You'd need to grind a bit of gold for your epic flying if you wanted to get that. Consumables for raiding were pretty cheap. You could do some reputations if you want, but there just wasn't much stuff to do.
To be fair though, isn't that just WoW in general until they added Mythic Plus or like challenge dungeons and mob? That's pretty much it. I mean, there's just... Okay, you reach your endgame, you farm all your gear, now you raid log. Or you do arena if you like. In vanilla there's like stuff to do as well, but vanilla can also be quite raid loggy, honestly. That's just how it is. Doesn't mean that the game is bad.
And it felt as though the expansion just didn't have that breadth.
It's a dumb criticism. I agree. I don't think it's like too big of a deal. Just make an alt. Yeah, you can do multiple alts as well.
Horizontal content that future ones have, and if you wanted to play the game more, you basically just had to make an alt and do it again. Now,
oh, there's a foot. I kind of like the raid log. I don't mind it. I get all my gear, I farm all the shit, I crank it out. And okay, now we're just chilling, we're locking to our raids, and we just do that. Whenever there's some new content, we can crank it again, and then that's it, right? I don't mind it too much, because it also means you can do other stuff as well.
Now, I do love some of the zones in TBC, but other ones, notably Blades Edge Mountain and Hellfire Peninsula, not exactly my favourite ones.
Kind of like
the thing about TBC leveling is it was quite linear in how you go through everything. There was
you just got to hell with your sorcerer on you've been playing Diablo as well? Dude, I'm kind of hyped to play Diablo later, man.
No dungeon finder that you could spam, there was no heirlooms for extra experience.
Yeah.
You kind of just had to go from one zone to the next, and the big choice in capping out your character was whether you went to Netherstorm or Shadow Moon Valley. Yeah. But apart from that, you kind of had to do a bit of every single zone, even if you didn't particularly like them. Raiding wise, there were extremely rigid raid comps due to group-wide buffs. Now, I've been pretty outspoken about group-wide buffs. I just don't like the design intention behind it at all. How it worked in Wrath of the Lich King and beyond, where buffs were just raid-wide, was better in my opinion.
I agree.
I realize if you have raid-wide buffs, people are likely to be class stacking more, but those same classes have those same utility buffs, and if you look at how things were in Wrath, they were likely still a one-off pick, the same as they've been in TBC, such as Shadow Priest or Boomkin. Speaking of group-wide buffs, perhaps the biggest offender had to be the Shamans, not only...
In a way, I do see it being nice that it was group-wide, because it made all of those suboptimal DPS more viable in the raids. Like, okay, we would have to bring some shamans, even if they're not the best DPS. We need them, right? Instead of like, okay, let's have 1 billion warlocks, right? And then 1 shaman, 1 shadow priest, that's it.
For their buffs, but the fact that bloodlust or heroism
so I can
was
see that.
just group wide. This made it so if you didn't have 5 shamans in every single raid throughout TBC, then you were missing out enormously. Just not getting heroism or bloodlust really isn't fun. On top of that, what some tryhard groups would do is swap shamans during fights into different groups. So you could have one group with all your highest DPS players with the best gear, you could give them a bloodlust, then swap another shaman in a bit later, give them another one, swap an—
Yeah, but they stopped doing this because it didn't count on parses anymore. And we all know that parsing in World of Warcraft is the true endgame. So they stopped doing that.
Another shaman in, give them another one, and they could just be lusted for the entire fight.
Yep.
But yeah, group-wide bloodlust and heroism really wasn't it. Despite there being a new competitive game mode in Arena, there was some extremely high levels of RNG in TBC. I don't know if you remember, Blizzard even brought back their tornadoes on certain maps for Season 1 because it was just like that back in the day.
And Parse Andes, I like doing damage in my groups and like doing well in the raid, but I don't really care to parse. It doesn't really like whatever to me, but I like pumping in the raids I'm in and I'm doing well.
Those tornadoes would randomly just ruin your day in Arena. But on top of that, you had heartbeat resist, which means when you apply a CC effect, it can randomly end early without you knowing when it's going to end. You had stun resist, of course, you had silences, you had mace stun, and some classes were just way out of whack for balance the whole game, notably Rogue, Resto Druid, Arms Warrior, and probably to a lesser extent Disc Priest and Frost Mage, just to name a few names. But I guess you do kind of sign up for that when you do classic PvP, knowing that nothing's gonna change. On the raiding side, raids were pretty hit or miss for me in TBC. I didn't really like the one boss raids, and I know Gruul isn't really a one boss raid, but it just—
Really? I didn't mind these at all. They were really easy. You just get a group, and you go in. There's the free loot basically. They're nice. I don't mind them.
Just felt like you're going somewhere, and then you're there for a short period of time, and then you have to go traveling again. I'd rather stay in a raid for a decent amount of time.
So shit. I didn't mind these. I never really had a big quarrel with like the one boss raids. Hi Nomson.
Worst raid, Mount Hyjal just wasn't good at all. It was probably one of the worst raids in this game's history.
They could have done Hyjal so much better, man. Dude, imagine you had like the first one you would like defend, right? And then the next one you would attack. So like you would attack the base instead of like, you know, having to defend again. Because it was just so repetitive. Okay, 8 waves of mobs and then again 8 waves of mobs again. If it was like swapped up where you defended it and you attacked into like an undead base with all the bosses being there, I think that would just be better, man. I don't know. But maybe they tried to stay true to like the Warcraft 3 story and stuff, right?
A lot of waiting for trash packs, and then a boss finally appears, and then you repeat the process.
Yeah, that's not. I know that's not how it happened in Warcraft 3, and they tried to stay true to that, right? Which is fair.
Some 6 times in a row or something, just not very enjoyable. Another criticism on raids I had was actually in Black Temple. I thought the Illidan fight was pretty disappointing.
Really?
It was very easy to blow cooldowns and burst through his demon form phase, and really never have to deal with that part of the encounter.
I never really saw that phase. True, that is actually kind of true, because you could just skip that entirely.
And that's probably the most challenging part of the encounter, and one of the most iconic ones as well. And we just never did it because we did too much damage. I didn't see a demon phase for more than a few seconds the whole way through TBC, and I think a lot of other people had this experience. Blizzard made changes to Ragnaros in Season of Mastery and Season of Discovery now, where he always submerges during the encounter. I think Illidan needs some kind of change, so you're forced to see his demon form and get the real experience of the entire fight. For PV,
dude, like a TBC with a few quality of life and then fixing some of these raids, dude, if they changed Hyjal a little bit and then did some stuff like that to Illidan, that would actually be quite interesting to go through. I'm not gonna lie, that could be kind of cool.
As a whole throughout dungeons and raids, I think there was too much emphasis on trash being difficult and bosses being comparatively easy in many cases. When I think of a raid, I think about doing the bosses, not struggling on trash and having to spam polymorph on those guys that spin around in Tempest Keep, otherwise they instantly destroy your entire melee group, for example. There was also...
I think the title is a little bit misleading, I don't know, but I think it's fun going through what TBC was and what it could be and stuff like that. I think a lot of people do have interest in getting TBC again. There's a lot that I've talked to that's like, okay, man, I would just be happy if they could do vanilla, fresh, into TBC, into Wrath, reset. Vanilla, TBC, Wrath, reset. Somewhat like similar to the ladder in Diablo 2, where they do like a reset of it and then you can go again. I think a lot of people probably would have interest in seeing that.
Way too many encounters or trash mobs throughout dungeons and raids, where Blizzard thought, let's make this more difficult. I know, let's add a mind control to this encounter. And
for me, would I have interest in playing TBC again? Probably, yeah, I would. Would I do with Wrath? I don't think so. Wrath, I don't think I really want to play through again. I've done it now. I know I don't really enjoy it that much. I wouldn't do Wrath. But TBC, I probably could want to do that. Wrath, no.
Despite more specs being viable, that vanilla playstyle was still looming, and what that meant was one-button rotations with not much depth to them. The majority of casters still just pressed one button as they had been doing throughout vanilla. I wanted to see a bit more from an expansion, if I'm honest. If I was on TBC again, I think I'd have to be on my seal-twisting rep pala to keep things interesting. Speaking of rep palas, and yes, this is definitely a niche thing, but it would help out a number of classes if it changed. But expertise early game is just way too rare of a stat for how important it is. Prior to 2.3, which is the Zulaman patch, weapon skill was still the main thing in the game for enabling your character to avoid dodges and parries, and the expertise stat didn't exist. So as a result, because it was brought in so late in the game, barely any gear early game in the expansion has expertise on it. And I never got a belt of 100 deaths on my rep pally, so yeah, that was pretty painful. I even went and checked, and in tier 4 for example, there are 2 gloves with expertise on, of course one's better than the other, and there are 2 legs with expertise on, same comment again, and 1 ring. So there's 5 items, but realistically 3 that you can wear. And one of the
Wrath races just lasted too long. It wasn't a bad game. Yeah, to a certain degree as well, but I didn't really enjoy it too much personally.
gloves is a green item from a quest in Netherstorm which you use well on into raiding. So basically, if there were more ways to get expertise early game, it would be good. And I think those have to be my main criticism. So really, why do people want TBC back now? Well, I think the biggest thing is that Vanilla got their error servers, but no other version of World of Warcraft has yet. And as time goes by, it's, I think, only natural that people want to send another fresh into different expansions. And at the moment, the oldest one without an error is TBC. And there are plenty of options for Vanilla, but nothing that carries over to the next step into an expansion, which typically the game does in one way or another. And for a lot of people, it's going to be to relive a time in the game when perhaps they started back in the day. This time around they want to try a different main, to complete some area of content they didn't have time to, or just to mess about and have some fun. Really?
I don't know. Vanilla, I'm like a fiend for that, you know that, but I'm not like the exact same for TBC. I like it, but it's not like, oh my god, TBC coming out again, right? I wouldn't really be fiending for it, but I would probably enjoy it. Maybe I would play it. I would like to see like a few quality of life changes if so, but I think it's pretty dank. Hellcat was a massive step for Classic, and now there is the Classic Plus step. Yeah, true as well.
Any reason is as good as the next. So why do people want TBC back now? Well, I reckon, overall, above anything else, it just feels like it's time. But will Blizzard do anything? That's quite the different story. They seem to have been pretty reluctant to make error servers or
I doubt there's gonna be any fresh or any TBC anything right now. I think they're currently putting all their balls in the basket with like SOD and like a potential like custom stuff for like Plunderstorm and all that stuff, and in retail, and then there's Cataclysm, right? I don't think they wanna. I highly doubt we're gonna get like a TBC fresh or a vanilla fresh or anything like that lately. I don't think so. Yeah, all the X in one basket, not balls, sorry.
Release fresh experiences for anything but vanilla. Then again, if you do want TBC, all you can really be doing is just keeping on asking, because you never know, one day you may just get it. So let me know.
I kind of doubt it, but I think it really depends on the reception of how SOD turns out, right?
Your thoughts on everything I went over, the good and the bad parts. Would there be anything that you'd add? And above all, if a TBC server existed now, would you be playing it above every other version of World of Warcraft? Drop it.
Currently? Probably not. I don't know. I'm doing SOD at the moment. There's like War Within coming out. There's the hardcore thing. I've been playing Japload lately and other stuff. I think for me, it would be too much. For me personally, it would be too many things going on. Like, I would be jumping from like so many different games and it would just confuse me, right? But I guess that's the fault of there being too much stuff. Am I not gonna finish Cataclysm? I'm raiding today. I'll still do Firelands and everything. No, I'll still be doing Firelands and all that stuff for sure. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how you guys feel about it, of course. I want progressive, fresh, not just dedicated TBC. Fair enough. That I would probably prefer that too, if so. There's only so many 5-hour streams one can do. Shut up. Remove SOD then. 6 hours on F, same. Okay, well, finished Cataclysm, he has some trouble finding a boss. Okay, man. Progressive, fresh. I think if they did do this, it would have to be a progressive, fresh, not just a TBC, like, here you go, right? It would have to be vanilla into TBC into Mayhap's Wrath, right? That would be the move if they did that. I'm just raid logging SOD, but I still wouldn't play TBC right now. I think I agree, Mufford. At the current time, yeah, I think I agree.
A comment down below. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening in. And I'll see you
on
the
moment,
next one very soon.
Interesting. I don't get the high. I mean, at the current time, I probably wouldn't. I wonder what the comments say. It's honestly so depressing. I remember as a kid thinking, wow, I can't imagine what MMOs will come up when I grow up, to find years later that I was in the golden age at the moment. You never really realize that though. When you're in like a really good time, you don't sit down and reflect about it. Nostalgia Thirst is a perfect example. You will never know what you have until it's gone. I'd love Classic TBC Eternal server. TBC starting level 1 would be awesome. I play TBC at Classic in a heartbeat. I think if they ever did this, I would definitely prefer to see vanilla going into TBC and then going into Wrath, right? Like a progressive thing. Instead of just like a fresh TBC out of nowhere, right? But at the moment for me, it's still too much, right? It's still way too much. Here's the video chat, check it out. From Will E. There it is, man. Would you want it to repeat? I mean, if they did that, then yeah, probably it would be a good idea to do that, like kind of like a ladder style, right? For sure. I think so.